Hey guys, it's Daryl again. It's Saturday afternoon, and I was looking over what you guys are interested in as far as recovery and drugs, and a lot of it ties into sex, and especially for guys, sex, drugs, especially with cocaine and methamphetamine. It makes, like I've talked about before, it seems to make guys hypersexual, and I can't speak for women. Like I said, I'm not a medical expert or anything, and the catch is a lot of times. The body parts aren't even functional. What's happened to me and what I saw happen a bunch of times is guys get their drugs. You always get this image of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And guys will get together, they get this idea that they can get these, cocaine and crack or whatever, and you lure the women in with it. And it seems to work to some extent. It did many, many times. So me or somebody else or I'd hear these stories, most, involving me and other guys. We go back to my place or somebody else's place with all the tons of drugs, a big stash of drugs. And I guarantee you every single time, no sex took place. The guys would talk a big game, and I remember a lot of times too, we'd all be sitting around and the girls would I think what the girls were doing was just trying to get more drugs. And they'd say things to entice the guys and get them all fired up, like, hey, just one more line and I'd be into this or that. Looking back, it's a world it's like a nightmare world that I'm so thankful I'm out of. The deception, the manipulation, just a dirty, dank, dark, disgusting world. So, yeah. So, inevitably, this is what happens. So to me, I haven't done methamphetamine much, but what will happen, what always happened, we get back, even if you kind of split off a guy and a girl, which would happen quite frequently, or it would just be me and a girl, inevitably, the drugs would become, I do more drugs, talk, do more drugs. The drugs would become the primary focus without a doubt. Every single time above the drugs. Like I said, you hear about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That's a lie. It is. It's a big lie. Just drugs. It's just drugs. The drugs will wipe out the rock and roll. It'll wipe out the sex. Like you hear guys in bands getting kicked out of bands. Eventually the drugs, you can't play good musically when you're all fucked up on heroin. Or you're speeding on meth. It doesn't work. I mean, at first people use it for some pot, for creative influences. It's all just a lie. It really is. It's a big lie. The whole, like I look back and the whole lie of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. The drugs inevitably end up destroying the other two. The rock and roll and the sex. So back to the sex with I could say this happened 3-4 dozen times where I'd be alone with a girl, gorgeous girl, whatever, and the focus is on the drugs, talk, and I would the high lasts less time, so I start doing more each time to keep my buzz up. And I've always been an extremely generous drug. I've always was an extremely generous drug user. And I would just, I'd give more and more away. And inevitably, the stash would run out, even if it was like a half ounce or whatever. So then, any kind of erotic plans would be put on hold, man, got to get more drugs. And could involve a couple hour chase between money or this or that, and God forbid, if there was no more money, the night was over. All of a sudden you would see people's moods, the guy and the girl, from, hey, let's see, yeah, you're looking hot. Let's go to the bedroom. And it would just go bam. The chick would you'd just get a face like they couldn't stand you. And they could not get out of that freaking your house fast enough, or vice versa if it was me in somebody else's house. Which just tells you it's all a lie. It's all a lie. And then, if you actually made it into the bedroom, you can't the truth of it is, with me, and I'm sure with other guys, it used to be that you can't perform. As long as the drugs are there, you keep thinking about, I just need another little more, just need a little more. So the sex never really takes off, right? Then it gets to a point where you keep doing more and more, and you get to the point where you cannot function. You're just a jittering, wiry mess that can't even speak, and sex ain't gonna happen. Or B, you run out of drugs and money, and the night ends. And I mean ends badly. Believe me, when the drugs and the money used to run out, that evening flatlines, and it flatlines hard. It's amazing how people, buddies, people that are all like, hey, you're great, man, and you remember the time? And then once those drugs run out, boom. Especially with the harder drugs, especially with crack, because the buzz was shorter. And I remember you tended to get a very angry, a lot of people would get a very, the moods would switch, when the drugs wore out, and there's paranoia. Looking back, the more I did the drugs then, I realized it was all just a lie. It was a horrible, I remember sitting around with my friends saying, why do we do this? But at that point, it was too late. We were addicted. We didn't have anything else we could do, or we did do. It was all we knew. So it was an addiction. Once you know how badly you're screwed, you're in too deep, and you're screwed badly. Okay, I'm going to throw in a little bonus here. One of the weirdest things, now I talk about how it makes guys hypersexual. One of the weirdest, most bizarre things, uncomfortable situations I've ever been in. This friend I knew from high school, he got a bad head injury, and he received a lot of money and a lot of different painkillers and drugs every single month. And I'll be honest, I was a different person. I was very manipulative, as all drug addicts are. And I would find reasons I always had a place, and he didn't. So I'd always have a reason to find him or bump into him and give him a place to stay for 2 days when he re-upped on his stash of money and drugs, just using him for his money and drugs. I'm not proud of it, but you don't get into recovery without admitting everything you've done. So yeah, so this one time, and I always came up with an escape plan. After 3 days, a reason to get him out, to the police are coming, somebody's got a warrant, you got to leave, So it was the 4th of July, the very last month I used, one of the last times I ever used. And he had a huge stash of drugs, and we're sitting in the living room, and he went upstairs to use the bathroom. He was going to stay over another couple nights. He talked about moving in permanently, but I knew there was no way that was ever going to happen. I was just using him for his drugs, and I planned to get him out of there the next day or two. He comes down the stairs, and he's wearing those women's cut-off pants. I don't know what they're called, culottes. Some kind of flowery blouse, lipstick, makeup, hair all done up. Yeah. Apparently, when he used drugs, this is the first time I saw this. He would cross-dress. So I started laughing. I thought he was kidding around at first. And he's like, what? This is what I do. And it didn't. Now, thankfully, I've never worried about gay people. I'm a big guy. I don't, I got a little nervous on how to handle it. I don't want to, I'm not going to hurt anybody or anything like that, but you're going to have to leave. I can't be comfortable. And there was a lot of drugs. So he ended up sticking around for a while, and I overlooked it. I pretended like it just wasn't there, and he was just so weird. The same guy I was just partying with now had all makeup on, dressed up like a woman. There was no hint. He didn't appear to be gay at all. It seems like he got aroused by dressing up as a woman. Eventually, we kept using drugs all night. Another guy came over, a dealer, and hung out with us. So I said, okay. I said, look, my parents are coming over this morning. I got to get you out of here for a little while and clean up. So I said, I'll take you to the park about 5 miles away. I'll drop you off there. I know a couple places, caves and backwoods places, cabin you can hang in, and I'll come pick you up in 2 hours. He agreed, no problem. And he still had all that shit on. And I dressed him out there. I mean, I drove him out there. I dropped him off, and I just left him there for the rest of the day. I had no intention of ever going back to pick him up. And I felt bad, because this guy, it's 4th of July. He's going to have to walk through a filled state park dressed up as a woman. And, it wasn't one of the nicest things I ever did. Well, I hear a window smash at 8 o'clock that night. He was trying to get back in the house. He said he had stuff in the house. I flipped out. Things went badly. He ended up in jail. I didn't. But I learned a lesson, and honestly, that was probably the second or third to last time I ever used. It's something I seriously regret. I acted, terribly. The manipulation, just that whole involving myself in that whole mess was something, it wasn't partying anymore. It wasn't, it had to stop. It was the bottom. So that's that story. All right, I'll throw in another interesting story at the end of the next video. All right, you guys have a great Saturday. Stay clean and sober, man.